Great. So that's it for me for now, but I'm going to bring up Carlene Thomas, who's going to welcome us into this space.
Thanks, Andrew. Osiem ni siaya I tanish kwalawan kwitsi kwitsalan ihui antha ansachalot antha mana santalia ikwaslahot siem antha imeth kwathan sachalot ikwaslahot siem ikweth squastematoch ikweth halat Hai sepka amit sep kwitwilam I chamathkoyam I squahotmish I slawata tamath. So what I said to you in the very teeny tiny bit of my language that I know called Hunkamitnam or Downriver Hulkameelam, I said, my respected ones, the feelings I have inside are really good. I'm really happy to see you and to be with you here tonight. And in our cultural ways, I introduced myself to you with my ancestral name. I carry the name Ansachalot. As far as I know, it doesn't have any meaning, but it's very meaningful to me because when I was a much younger human being, my grandmother had to find that name. A lot of our names were put away during the residential school during that early colonial times. So when she found it, she brought it to her oldest auntie, the matriarch in her family, and said, Auntie, I found this name. It belongs to you. And our auntie, my great auntie, said, oh, no, Munt. Munt means child or young one. You found that name. You should carry it. So when I became old enough or worthy enough or ready for the name my grandmother granted my sister, gave my sister next to me and us our ancestral names. And in our cultural ways, I shared a little bit of my family tree. We do that for a number of reasons, but here it is to inform you, the audience, that I know who I am. I know where I come from. And as a Walmochta, as a grandmother, I carry that responsibility a lot more dearly these days. So my parents are the late hereditary chief Ernie George, or Iggy, as his friends called him. My mom is Deanna George. My grandparents, my paternal grandparents, are the late hereditary chief John L. George and Lillian George, or Dolly, as her friends called her. For a real long time, I did not acknowledge my mother's parents. And I guess as I became closer to becoming a grandmother myself, it really bothered me because both my grannies were such integral parts of my growing up years. And what I realized was that I was a very colonized person. You know, back in the day when they were building Canada, they took all the Indians and stuck us on reserves, drew borders around those reserves, stuck labels on those reserves. They effectively divided us, and they set us against each other. We were then in competition with each other over lands and resources. So, in an act of decolonizing myself and reconciling my relationship with the Musqueam and the Squamish people, it's with great honor and respect that I acknowledge my maternal grandfather as Squastematoch Stanislas Joseph from the Squamish Nation. My maternal grandmother comes from the Snuneymuxw, the Nanaimo people, and Ginkolith, the Nisga'a people up in the Nass Valley. I never did ask how those two met. And I don't know who I can ask now, because my mom doesn't even know. Perhaps they met here in Vancouver. By then it was still it was a huge gathering place for a lot of Indigenous folks. Anyway, that's who some of my family are. And then I raised my hands, and I'm sure you're all aware this is a gesture of welcome here in Coast Salish territory. Hi, Sepka, thanking all of you. Amit Sepwatwilam, welcoming you here to the homelands and waters of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh people. And that is another act of reconciliation and decolonization on my part, just acknowledging my sister nations. I'm really happy to be here with you. Les is my nephew, so I'm really excited to hear him speak tonight. I think that's what's going to happen, and enjoy your evening. Thank you.
Les is indeed going to speak in just a minute. Before I introduce Les, though, I will acknowledge that the Vancouver Public Library is located on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Unceded means that the Indigenous peoples who live and have lived on these lands for over 10,000 years never signed away their homelands. As a public servant, I think it's vital to acknowledge both land and deeds, and to think carefully both about what has been done to the rightful stewards of these lands by colonial governments, and what I can do going forward to decolonize my ways of working, learning, and teaching. So I have had the joy and honor of acting as the liaison librarian. I'm going to wait for this to go all the way up. Actually, there we go. So as I was saying, I have had the joy and honor of acting as the liaison librarian for the Indigenous Storyteller in Residence this year, Les George. One of the teachings that Les has passed on to me is that truth has to come before reconciliation. So it should be said that the Vancouver Public Library is a colonial institution founded and funded by colonial governments. It is named after a colonizer. The library is a place of lifelong learning, and we need to recognize that the ways we learn and teach are born of and often reinforce colonial ways of learning, teaching, and treating knowledge. The Indigenous Storyteller in Residence program is essential to the library's efforts to decolonize its practices and to center Indigenous knowledge systems and ways of learning and teaching. The events Les has hosted in his time here at the library have been immensely successful. They have been enriching, inspiring, and educational for everyone who's been there. But the impact of Les's presence is felt in more than just these programs that he's done. It will have a lasting effect, not just on what we do at the library, but the way we do it. So to give a personal example of this, I'm a librarian, and to prepare for my role in this residency, I researched. I read many, many things, and I searched and found and remembered a lot of pieces of information. And on Les's first day at the library, I was giving him a tour. And Les said, "Have you ever heard of Tsleil-Waututh?" And I said, "Oh, that's an easy one. I did a lot of research." "Yes." And then he asked, "Do you know what Tsleil-Waututh means?" And I'd read every page of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation website. I'd read all the books. But at that exact moment, I didn't know what it meant. And Les patiently and kindly explained to me that it's people of the inlet. And he talked about what that means to him. And that's a great example of how Les teaches and what he teaches. That it's one thing to know a thing and something altogether to know what it means. I've learned an incredible number of things from Les about the land on which I live and work and the people who are its rightful stewards. But I've learned the most about how to treat knowledge, how important it is to focus on what's in front of you and not get lost in the act of reaching out and grabbing for pieces of knowledge as if they are objects you get to keep and to own. Not to treat knowledge as something to hold on to or even a thing at all, but rather as a continual process I get to be grateful to keep being a part of on an ongoing basis. I've introduced Les at all his events this year, and I've read from his impressive bio and list of accomplishments every time. And that has been a pleasure, but I'm happiest to have seen the kindness, generosity, and warmth that Les brings to everything he does, none of which can be captured on the page or in a speech. So, Les George, everybody.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Auntie. It's been a really long 4 months that I've been here. Oh, no, let me re-say that again. It's been a really quick 4 months that I've been here. It just went by just like that. And tonight, I'd just like to share a little bit about what went on. But part of my teachings and protocols that I've been taught is that when we gather like this is I share a song. So before I start, I'd just like to share a song with you. And this song is our clan song, our wolf. I'm part of the wolf clan on my mom's side. We'll see you. told many times from elders, matriarchs, and respected ones that there's different meanings when you say Osium. And when I'm saying Osium to you guys, I'm saying it out of respect and thanks and for your ears and listening to the words that I say. As Andrew mentioned, my name's Les George. My father's Sam George from Squamish Nation. And my mother's Wanda Rose from Tsleil-Waututh. And that's who I am, Les George. I am Tsleil-Waututh. I am people of the inlet. And that's who my mother was, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and so on. I'm first generation non-residential school. So that means that my parents went, and my grandparents, I'd say back 5 generations, if not more. So when I sing these songs that I hear, I didn't start singing them until my early teens. And when I was in high school, I was one of those, my mother too, my mother was one of those ones who talked to many different nations. And not only First Nations, nations from all over. And she wasn't shy about it. She would always speak her mind, speak her heart. And that came through my blood too. And when I was in high school, I'd always run into different nations who would speak other languages. And they would always ask me, how come I don't speak my language? And I didn't have an answer for them at that time. But as a knowledge keeper, and as I grew older, I learned stuff every day. And I don't stop learning. I'm still learning. And what I found out is that my parents weren't allowed. They weren't allowed to speak their language. And neither were my grandparents. Also come from the bloodline of the late Chief Dan George. That's my great-grandfather. And his oldest daughter was my grandma, Rose Thomas. She was the oldest daughter of Dan George. And she was kind of a favorite with him. So he would always go to her house when he'd come back home. And we would all gather there and talk to him. But back to the high school, I didn't know. And it took me a long time to learn that. But I've done a lot of search and stuff with residential schools. And today I know what my parents went through. And it hurts my heart inside. And I'd also like to share and a little bit of promote my dad's book. He came out with a book on his life story, and it's called The Fire Still Burns. And he talks all about the residential school. I'd like to share with you guys, about 5 years ago, I went to firefighting. I wasn't firefighting myself, I was a first aid man there. And I was with another First Nations. He was from Smithers or somewhere up that way. Oh, Port Rupert. And he was very angry one day because we sat in the truck for like 10 days waiting to do some first aid. And we're sitting in the truck one day and he was really angry. And he told me, he said, you know what? I'm really mad at my mother. I was like, oh, what's going on? He's like, I always tell her that I love her and she never says it back. And this is one of my teachings, and I did a lot of studies, and I heard from a lot of different elders that went to residential school. And he's like, hey, you know what? I was like, me and you were the same age. And he's like, yeah. I was like, you know what? I'm pretty sure your mom and my dad are the same age. Because my mother, unfortunately, is in the spirit world. And I told him, I see my dad, and I had the same problem as you, but I wasn't as angry. And you know what I want to say to you? And he's like, what's going on? I was like, your mother probably went to residential school. He's like, yeah. I said, she wasn't allowed. She wasn't allowed to show affection. She wasn't allowed to say, I love you. If she had siblings in school, if she was a female and he was a male brother, they weren't allowed to see each other in school. And my mother comes from a big family, a family of 10. She's the oldest, and she has 4 sisters and 5 brothers. So when I told him that, I drove him from Vanderhoof back to Terrace, and we stopped at his mom's. And when we got in there, he gave his mother a really big hug. I know that it hit him when I told him that about the residential school. It really hit him deep inside. And the reason I'm saying this is because just the year before that, I would always tell my dad the same thing, that I love him. And he wouldn't answer back neither. And And I didn't know why either at the time. And then my brother, he does the same work as me. Both of us have worked in the school districts for the last 27 years. And my brother called him in for just recently, within the last 10 years, they've come up with Orange Shirt Day. Do you guys know about Orange Shirt Day? Yeah. So my brother hosted an Orange Shirt Day, and we had a circle. And they had circles of chairs. And there's like 1 row circles, 2 row circles, like 5 rows of circles, and the whole school was there. It was a smaller school. They're high school kids, so they heard my dad's stories. And the stories that he told were really intense and really horrific. And something that I would never want to happen to my kids. And I sat right beside my dad, and I heard every word that he was saying. And it hurt. But it's words that I needed to hear. And I knew I needed to hear them. In my mind and in my heart, it hurt, but in my mind, I knew I needed to hear it. And that made me actually appreciate him and love him more. And I keep saying it. I keep telling my dad, every time even when I talk to him on the phone, I say, I love you, Dad. And now he says it back, and it makes me really happy. Thank you guys for listening. So in the library here, I've been doing a lot of storytelling. I've been going to a lot of different libraries throughout Vancouver. I've been to the library in Strathcona, in Mount Pleasant, and I've been sharing stories and knowledge. And also down in Carnegie. There's a library down there, and I went down there. And as I went around to all these places, I would share a lot. And when I share the stories, and I'd share where I'm from, as Andrew said, that's the question that I ask everybody. Have you guys heard of Tsleil-Waututh? And everybody puts up their hand. And then I say, hey, do you know what Tsleil-Waututh means? And they all put their hand down. And that's who we are. And my auntie, we're people of the inlet. And I'm also a cultural guide for Takaya Tours, our worldly renowned canoe journeys that we do out of our nation. We go through our summer village. We go out of our summer village, Weyahwachin. But when I was growing up, I never knew it as Weyahwachin. I knew it as Kate's Park. And that's about maybe 10, 15 minutes off of Second Narrows Bridge. You keep driving east about maybe 10, 15 minutes, and you get to Weyahwachin. Now I know that we found some shell midden down there. And that's where we were told, just like when you're in the library here, they have the compost, the containers and all that. But even before containers, we had a compost pile. And we were told we relied on salmon to get us through the winter. We also harvested elk, deer, all the meat bones, crab, clams, oysters. So all that stuff, when we were done eating, we were to put it in a pile. And when we would put it in that pile, it started growing after thousands of years. Now what I've been told is that we hired archaeologists. And if you take a garden spade, and has anyone been to Weyahwachin, Arcades Park? It's down in Deep Cove there. And when you go there, right down by the beach, if you ever go there, there's some stairs there. And when you get to those stairs down to the beach, there's a lifeguard chair on this side. And on this side, there's a fence there. It wasn't always there. When I was growing up, it wasn't there. And there's a fence line there now. And right in front of that fence, it goes down to the beach. Like almost from the top of here down to these chairs, to the beach. And all of that pile is shell midden. That's where all our shells and everything would go. Now, if we started digging with a garden spade from the top of this banner right here, with a garden spade, every scoop that we would take is 3 to 5 years of how long we've been here. Tsleil-Waututh people. Oh, see. Now today I'd like to share about another village too that is right across the inlet from Kate's Park, from Weyahwachin. Oh, also Weyahwachin means faces the wind. And if you're ever down there, especially these last couple days, there's always a breeze right down on the beach down there. So just head down to the beach down there, not all together at once, because then we'll take up all the breeze. So when we go down there, there's always a breeze down there. and it always feels good. And the water temperature never changes. So if you want to get refreshed, you can go in there for a swim. So right across the inlet, and also what I've been told, and what I know, is Tsleil-Waututh used to be 12 to 14,000 strong. And that we were hit by 2 pandemics of smallpox, by 2. So we're almost wiped out. And right now, we're almost back up to 600. Is that right, Auntie? Yeah, we're almost back up to 600 members of Tsleil-Waututh. So from 12 to 14,000 down to what I've been told is 13 people at one time. And what I mean, also, I mean 13 adults. 13 men. Holy.
Would be the households.
They would be the households. Holy. 13. And that's the adults, because then the kids, I don't think, would go under status, right? They'd just take the same number as the adult. So when I first started coming back to the village, I call it a village. If you were to Google it, it would say IR3. That means Indian Reservation number 3. And I believe my father lives on IR 7 or 6, Lower Mission. And he's Squamish, and that's where he stays, just about 5 minutes west of the sea bus on the North Shore. But that's what they would say in Google. But I like to call it a village, because right across the street is where my cousin sis lives. And just 2 blocks up is where my grandson right over there lives. He lives 2 blocks up the road from me. So my oldest son, I have 2 sons, and they're young men now. So, and my other son, my youngest son, he lives a block and a half down the road from me. And my auntie, she lives about maybe 5-minute walk east from me. So that's why I call it a village, because we're all family there. And anytime people of the inlet, anytime I feel angry, or mad, or sad, or I don't know what I'm feeling, I go down to that inlet. And I know these teachings are through all of us. And I go down to the inlet, and I ask my mom what's going on with my feelings. I bring a cedar bough, which is one of our medicines, and we have many different meanings for it. I bring it down to the beach with me, and I take what's called a cedar bath. And I take it in the size of my hand. I don't take a really big piece. And I brush my head, my mind, my eyes, my ears, my mouth, all the way down my heart, my arms, and then I offer it back to what I call the Creator. When I grew up, I called him God. But now I changed over to Creator. I still believe in God, and I also believe in Creator. But when I pray, I say to the Creator, and I offer up the cedar bough, and I place it back into the inlet. And I feel all this weight being lifted off of me. Also, that drum, that song, when I first sang it to you guys, how did that make you guys feel? Feels good, eh? At one point in time, if I sang that song, and we were all Tsleil-Wauts in here, and I was singing that song, there's a chance that we could all be arrested and thrown in jail for singing that song. And for gathering more than 5 people. We weren't allowed to gather more than 5 people. And all those times have changed. And I'm happy that they've changed. And because one of the next villages I'd like to share about with you is Tumtumeatin. Tumtumeatin. And Tumtumeatin means where many people gather. And growing up, it also has an English name. It's called Balcarra Park. Have you guys heard of Balcarra Park? It's out in just past, you get in there through Port Moody. You're going through Port Moody, then you drive for like about maybe 30 minutes. And you come to the end, and it's also on the other side of the inlet, so it goes back down to the saltwater. And it takes about, if I left from my house, it would take about maybe 45, 50 minutes to get there by car. But if I went over by canoe or kayak, it'd probably take about 20 minutes, if not less. If I was younger and stronger, then it'd take less. So if you're ever to go there, Balcarra, Tumtumeatin, where many people gather, there was markings of a big house there. And we had certain big houses in certain areas. Long houses, big houses is what they were called. And there's markings there of a really, really long and big house there. And when I've been to smokehouses or big houses, I've been to a lot throughout Lower Mainland and BC. And when I go there, there's usually only 2 fire pits in there. The one at Tom Tomatin, what I've been told, had 8 to 10 fire pits in there. And we were always welcome there. If we were all to Tsleil-Waututh, and we would paddle there for the winter time, because that was our winter village. If you ever see it, you'll see why it was our winter village, because it's right close to the water, but there's also trees blocking the wind from the east, from the west, and from the south. So it's kind of enclosed. And when we get there, we would have to go in, we'd have to say who we are, who our parents were, just like Auntie did. We'd have to say all that to a doorman. There'd always be a doorman hired, and he would stay there and he would wait for you to say that, and then you would be welcomed in. And there were multiple levels like this in the big house. And the elders would be placed closer to the fire, and the young ones would be placed up higher. Because those are our teachings, is that we take care of our elders first. So Tom Tomatin is where we go stay for the winter. If you're younger, if you're a child and you went over there because, say your dad broke his ankle, or he had a bad wrist, or he just wasn't a good hunter, he would be welcomed over there and taken care of for the winter. And we would stay there until early spring, or until it started getting warmer like now, or until we couldn't stand each other anymore. And then we'd jump back out in our canoes and go back to our regular campground. So that inlet, it runs from Lionsgate Bridge all the way east to Second Narrows Bridge. And to Tsleil-Waututh, we're on both sides of the inlet. So through all of Vancouver. And then we keep going into Burnaby, and it's still the North Shore on the north side. And it goes through Burnaby, and then you keep going east, and then the inlet forks off a little bit. And down inlet when it forks right past Burnaby, it goes down another 10 kilometers to a place called, what's it called again? I'm just going there pretty soon too. In Port Moody area, they have a little inlet in there. I can't remember the name of that place. But outside, St. Maltman. Oh, see him. So that was one of our other villages right in there too. And it's a nice little cove area, and it's well taken care of too. And then on the outside, if you keep going up the inlet, you'd get up to Tom Tomatin, and that would be our winter village. And right there is where Balcarra is. And the other village that I'd like to share with you is our salmon village. And our salmon village was all the way at the end of the inlet. Now, if we keep going up there, up the inlet, if from Tom Tomatin to Inlay-Watosh is where we go to harvest our salmon. Now, what I've been told is that to Tsleil-Waututh, we're 80 to 85% relied on the salmon. So we go up there for our salmon harvest, and we would gather. There was also, I went up there that year with the archaeologist, and we paddled them up there. We brought a bunch of warriors, and we all paddled up there. And this archaeologist, he knows everything about Tsleil-Waututh. And we threw him in the canoe, we paddled him up there, and he showed us the markings of the salmon big house that we would stay in while we're up there. And this was, like, we even had a picture of it. We had a picture of my late grandpa's brother. My uncle's, he had a couple other brothers, Uncle Steve and Uncle Spin. Uncle Stan, his name is, but we call him Uncle Spin. Him and Uncle Steve were sitting on the front of the longhouse, and they had a picture taken. So that day when we went up there, he had there was 2 grandsons there, and they took the same picture. That picture's in the North Vancouver Museum. So that salmon village that we go to, that day we went up there, it wasn't salmon season yet, but we did go up there, and there's a song that goes with that, and It's called the Big George song, but I've also heard it's been called the Salmon song. And that's one of the songs I just like to share with you guys. Oh, see you. So those are the villages that Tsleil-Waututh lived and maintained on. And we have a lot of keepers in our village, just like many other villages. And when I say villages, I mean like Squamish, Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, all those villages. And I've been to all these villages, and I know today, just like Auntie was saying, felt like in school, felt like there was a lot of button heads. And back in the day, they would call us Berards. We're known as Berard. And they're like, oh, you're Berard. They're like, oh, you're Squamish. And we almost like get into fistfights. That's how bad it was. And I know those guys today. And today we call each other brothers. And today we all get along. We hug each other even when we see them. And as I was mentioning, that was only when I was in grade 8 to 12. It was like that. And I've seen us come so far. I've seen us, and I've been told by some of our knowledge keepers that when we maintained all these lands, as keepers of the lands, that we wouldn't even be fighting back then. We would share the lands, Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh. And if we came across one another, we'd be like, oh yeah, go back there like a couple hundred yards. There's a good fishing hole over there. Or if we come across somewhere else in the trees in the woods, we'd be like, oh yeah, there's a few deer up there if you're looking for deer. We would help each other. And we're almost back to that now. If we are back to that now. The love, the sharing, the caring, we're back to that now. And a good example of that is just a couple days ago, we had an honoring. We had an area where we'd gather actually to trade. It was called, I believe it's called Squai Squai. And today the English name is Lumberman's Arch. And just past Lumberman's Arch, coming east, is where the lighthouse is. And right by the lighthouse, they have flagpoles there. And they did ceremony there the other day, and they put up acknowledgements and flags for this Musqueam, for the Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh. Oh, see you. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
Hi, my name's Ian.
Oh, see you.
I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about what you think. You mentioned that there was, in your lifetime, there was some tension
Yes.
between the two nations, and that's changed.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could talk a bit about, in your opinion, like what the journey of that change, what caused that change, why it's different now, what happened.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I'm first generation non-residential school. And I believe the people my age are all same thing, first generation, because the last school that closed, I believe, was in '97. And my son was born. There's a chance that he could have went. There's a chance that I could have went. And just the anger, the hate that they put into the kids. One of the sayings was they tried to take the Indian out of the child. That was their goal. That was what they tried to do. And by doing that, they put all this hate into them. And I know for a fact that there were some of our relations that ran away or that hid. I know that they hid so that they didn't have to go to school. And they're some of our keepers right now of these teachings that I'm just talking about. So some of the parents were very angry, and some of them didn't know how to parent, and life changes go on. And I've even been told that we weren't even allowed to go past grade 10. And we weren't allowed to go to university. And all of that has been changing now. Now we can go through all the way to grade 12. We can go all the way through college. We can go all the way through university. And during those times that all this is going on, and we're all going back to school and getting our education, and also, as Auntie was saying, is that they tried to divide us and conquer us. And there were elders that wouldn't let that happen. And they told the knowledge keepers, they kept teaching them the language. Keepers of the language, the elders, they passed it on. The ones that didn't go to school, they were called savages. But they kept the teachings. They kept the teachings alive. They kept the language alive. They kept the weaving, the drums. They'd have to go hide in the mountains to share songs. And they would share that with their younger ones. And now those younger ones are passing on their teachings. And that's what I believe. That's what I believe, is that their teachings are coming through. And I myself, I didn't listen to them. What I was told sometimes is that, or what I thought sometimes is that, oh, you think you're better than me? But now I don't believe it. Now I want to learn what they learned. And then I want to know what they know. We'll see you. Anybody else? Yes?
Really simple. Your father's book, The Fire Still Burns.
Yes.
What was his name?
Sam George. Yeah. Yeah, senior too. Because my brother's junior, and we're just telling Auntie Leah the other day, we did an opening and I ran into her yesterday. And it says Sam George and it says senior on there, or Squamish elder. And Leah's like, you're not an elder. She's like, I'm older than you. I'm like, I know. So when we did another opening down at the Western Bay Shore, we came out and the guy called us up. And when we went up, they had a picture of my dad on the screen behind us. My brother comes up and he's like, just getting ready to talk. And he's like, as you can see, that's not me on the photo there. That's my dad. So I'm Sam Jr. and this is my dad, Sam Sr. And my brother's like really big, he's like a 6-footer. And my dad's like really like about 5'9", 5'7". He's like, this is Big Sam and I'm Little Sam. But that's changed over time. We'll see him. We're hosting a book release on June 3rd at Chief Joe Mathias and Auntie, yeah. Where? Chief Joe Mathias Center. It's in North Vancouver.
100 Cap Road.
Oh, we'll see him. Thank you. Yeah. So just before I finish, as if there's not any more questions. Yes?
You mentioned your father had some stories. Could you maybe share one?
Well, yeah, I could share one. His question was, I mentioned my father went to residential school and had horrific stories. I could share one with you, and it hurts me a bit, but I'll share it with you. And the one I'd like to share is he went to residential school. I believe he was only grade 4 or 5 at the time, and he was already sick of it. He's already sick of residential school because he calls it. He said he liked jail better because my dad went to jail, I believe in grade 8 or 9, from residential school. They took him out and threw him in jail, in a man's jail. But the one story that I know is that when he went to residential school, he was sick of it, and he ran away. And he ran away up to Squamish. And this is before they had a highway. So the only way you can get up there is by train or by ferry. So he jumped on a cargo train, you know those ones that carry stuff? And they have little shelters like as big as this that you can hide in where they hook them up together. He hid in one of those on the way up to Squamish. And when he got up there, he took off to his auntie's house. And when he got there, he told him what was going on at the school. And the parents were always lied to. They always lied to the parents. They always told them that they're taking good care of them, that the kids are doing all right. They'd always say this, but it was never. It was total opposite. So the police, the RCMP, they went up there and they got my dad. They kind of had a feeling they knew where he was. So they did. They went up there and got him. And when they got him, they found another boy up there, my dad's cousin, around the same age. And they took him back too. They took him from his mom. And this is the part that hurts a little bit, is when they took my dad and that cousin, is they had custom cuffs for 10-year-old. My dad, oh yeah, that's right, my dad said he was 10 when he ran away. So when they brought him back down on the ferry, they had my dad and his cousin in handcuffs for the size of a 10-year-old. And when they brought him back to school, he said his cousin only spoke the language. And my dad knew a little bit of the language, but he also knew English. And when they were out on the courtyard talking, his cousin asked him something in the language, and my dad told him in English, and then he translated in the Squamish language. And right at that time, there was a priest behind him. And he heard my dad speaking in his native language. And they had big boots at the time, and he took the boot off, and he beat my dad on the side of the head. And my dad doesn't have hearing in his left ear anymore. And those are the stories. That's only one of the stories that my dad shared. And that's just one of the ones I just like to share tonight with you. Awesome. Yes?
Thank you for being here, Mr. George.
Awesome.
At what age did you start to learn about your history?
13, 14. My mother was still here. My mother was still alive. Awesome. And we had a made stage like this, maybe a little bit bigger. And me and my mom showed up to my my grandmother, I guess both, Uncle Joe and Auntie Ann. It was their brother and sister, and they had a stage in the back, and they did our traditional dancing on it. And my mom always hung out with family. So she's like, come on, let's go, we're going to go see what's going on. So we went to the stage, and they had lawn chairs showing on, and Uncle Len, he was there, and he was leading a dance practice, traditional dance practice. And he's like, go. My mom's like, go dance, they're going to do the wolf. I'm like, oh, I don't do that. And you know how mothers are. She's like, get up there. I was like, oh, okay. So I ran up there. And then when I did the dance, it just felt so uplifting. My heart felt really big. I was like, looked at my mom, and her heart felt really big. And I could just see the love. I could feel the love coming from my mom. And just felt so honored to do that dance. And then since then, as a knowledge keeper, I've been learning every day. And since then, I've been learning every day. And not from just one person, from many people. Oh, see you. So my grandfather, great-grandfather, late Dan George, he made a good print in his life, footprint for our nation and for many other nations as First Nations people. And I heard that he traveled to a lot of different villages or reservations into different cities, and he was put up in 4 or 5-star hotels all the time. And he would choose not to go there. He would choose to go to the village. And he would sit around with the elders, the chiefs, and whoever wanted to come visit him. And he would share his knowledge, and they would share theirs with him, and he would share this song with them. And today we still use this song for ceremony, and it's Tsleil-Waututh's prayer song. And we use it for when our young ones come into our world, and we use it for ceremony, we use it for blessings, and we use it when our loved ones carry on into the spirit world. And this song was loved by many. And when you go to these villages, they liked the song too. And they approached my grandfather. They gathered, they talked it over, and they approached my grandfather. And they asked if they could adopt it. And that's the way our teachings go. If we want to do something, then we need to approach where that song comes from, and we need to ask permission to use that song. And there's certain songs that I know of, but I can't sing them because they're from another family. But they approached my grandfather, and they asked if they could sing the song too. And being the humble man my grandfather was, he agreed, and he said yes. And this is Slave with Tooth Prayer song is also known as the Coast Salish anthem. And I mentioned I've been working with the school district for 27 years, and not only that, I work for different school districts now. I work with North Van, Burnaby, Vancouver, and when I go to these schools now and I share this song, it really fills my heart because I see kids from many different nations joining in with me and singing this song. And this song is also being sung at events like Canuck games, BC Lion games. I've seen it sung at the lacrosse games. So if there's no more questions, then I'd like to finish with that song. Oh, see you. Andrew?
So thanks so much for coming, everybody, and thanks so much to Les George. It has been an incredible residency, and if there's any teachers in the crowd, Les is doing a virtual school visit next week, which you can sign up to. We'd suggest that. But for tonight, we're done, and thanks so much for coming, and yeah, Les George, everybody.
Oh,